Well, hello there. In this episode, I'm going to be discussing the new tooling Sealab kit, the recreation of the classic kit that ILM used to detail out most of the original Star Wars models. This new kit is certainly under a lot of pressure, but it's making waves, so let's dive in and make sure it's not substandard. When you look at the Millennium Falcon, or most any other Star Wars filming model, you're going to see Aurora Sealab model kit parts everywhere, from the docking rings to the sensor dish panels to the kitchen sinks in the cockpit. Sealab is everywhere. If you want to build a studio scale replica of the Millennium Falcon without duplicating parts via casting, you're going to need 11 Sealabs. The easiest and least expensive way to obtain these parts is from GrabCAD. They are slightly incorrectly sized and they're missing some of the characteristics that are visible on the real parts, but they're free and you can 3D print as many as you need. So there's that. If I wasn't being so persnickety about my build, that's probably the route that I would go. The other option is to source an original Aurora kit, which is a little easier said than done. While certainly not the hardest required kit to source, on the rarity scale, they're about a 7 or 8 out of 10. They do show up on eBay occasionally, and when they do, they're rather expensive. This is my original kit. It's the Aurora Canada boxing, which will make it even more rare than the ones you will normally find on eBay. The box is slightly different, the insert packaging is different, and the instructions are different. But the plastic themselves are exactly the same as the ones you'll find on the US edition. Instead of buying 11 of these, I've created rubber molds for casting my own parts. Now, it's well known that ILM casts a lot of parts, so for me to do the same, I don't consider that cheating. Okay, then, so why are these kits so rare? Well, mostly because it seems there was only one production run. Well, maybe. Stick with me and I'll get back to that in a minute. But why was this kit never repopped by the likes of Round 2 or Atlantis? Well, the story is that in 1977, Aurora ran into some financial trouble and was acquired by Monogram Models, which then began moving Aurora assets to its own facilities. During the transportation, the train that was hauling the model kit tooling derailed, with all the tooling winding up at the bottom of a frozen river. And at that point, any of the kit tooling that was salvaged was worth more as scrap steel than anything else. So for about 50 years, sourcing original kits or 3D printing replicas was kind of the only option for those building studio scale models.
No, there is another.
This is the new tooling Sealab kit from a company in Georgia, USA called Doll & Hobby. It is a part-for-part reproduction of the original Aurora kit, and they've even reproduced the original box art. Well, mostly. So before I get too deep into it, it's disclaimer time once again. This kit, and indeed the original, I paid for with my own money. My videos are not sponsored, and nobody gives me free stuff, which means I can say what I want about the products that I show off or use in my videos. And so I do. So with that out of the way, let's take a look at the new kit and see how it stacks up against the original. This original kit cost me about 550 Canadian dollars, including shipping, which isn't bad given there are kits on eBay now going for around 700 Canadian dollars once you account for shipping. The new kit, purchased directly from the Cult TV Man website, cost me about 185 Canadian dollars, including the shipping. Then there was another 44 Canadian dollars for a US steel surtax, for a product manufactured in China and not made of steel, which is still expensive, but that is the reality of the Canadian dollar, the US initiated trade war, and shipping internationally with the United States Postal Service. But even with all that, this kit is still less than half of what I paid for the original, and it's far easier to get. I'm not a big fan of model kit reviews that spend most of the video talking about the box. I don't necessarily care about the box. Nobody's building the box. But in this particular case, I think it warrants a mention because of how well Doll & Hobby has reproduced the original box art. There are only a few little changes. Other than the logo change, the largest change I noticed was it's missing the US Navy wording along. Contrary to popular belief, the names of military organizations and their insignia are not public domain. In Canada, at least, to use the terms RCAF or RCN or their roundels, you need permission at least, and in sometimes full licenses. They're not just something that you can use. In the past, the RCAF has issued CNDs to companies like Hasegawa for improper use of those roundels. So perhaps it's the same case here. US Navy wording has been omitted because there was no permission. The wording is, however, on the decal sheet, so I don't really know. I'm just guessing. The other notable change is the box bottom. The original just had plain cardboard, while the new one has a lovely photograph of the build. I spent years screen printing decal sheets for my own model brand, as well as for other people's decal lines, and even designed decals for third-party kit manufacturers. So the decal sheet is usually the first thing that I look at when I open any model kit box, even before the plastics. One of the first things I noticed was that the new kit has used the correct USN font, whereas pretty much all original Aurora kits use the same incorrect typeset for all military markings, regardless of the nation. Aurora was never really one to worry about getting the decals correct. While these new decals are professionally screen printed, the same as any decals you'd get in most any other model kit, it doesn't look like they were done by Cartograph. The paper, the edging, the registration all suggest that these decals were screen printed in-house. And here's a small clue about what I'll be speaking about in a few moments. The original US version had its decals printed in two parts. The original Canadian version had its decals printed on one sheet and with a different layout. This new kit has its decals printed on one sheet, but now includes the markings that went on the end caps of the submersible. Before we get to the kit parts, let's take a look at the instructions. The original kit, at least the Canadian version, has this 16-page booklet. It has exploded views, and the text is written in both French and English, except for the history of the Sealab that's at the back of the booklet. That's in English only. The US edition also has a small booklet, although the physical size is a bit different, and I'm sure it was in English only. The new kit instruction booklet, also of 16 pages, is much larger, with different front and rear page layouts. The exploded view drawings are pretty much identical, with just some slight changes to the layout of the callout drawings. And it looks like even the part numbers are the same between the old and the new kits. They also include a few black and white photos of the completed build at the back of the booklet. So do you remember a few moments ago I said that there was only one production run? Well, the Canadian boxing and the Canadian instructions may suggest otherwise. So let's take a look at that. The US instructions and box state made in USA, as well as lithoed in USA. Lithoed, or lithography, is really just the process for which the box and the instructions were printed. However, the Canadian box and instructions state made and lithoed in Canada. They also tell Canadian customers to go to Aurora Plastics of Canada Limited for replacement parts, not Aurora Plastic Corp of the United States. Given that the company was called Aurora Plastics of Canada, and they did produce model kits of both the CF-100 Canuck and the CF-105 Aero fighter jets, perhaps there were two separate production runs, one in the States and one in Canada. As far as I'm aware, there are no lists publicly of what tooling was destroyed in the crash or subsequently disposed of by Monogram. Maybe it survived. Maybe it's been squirreled away in some secret government warehouse buried deep under the Nunavut permafrost. Or more likely, none of that is correct and it's just wishful thinking. But anyway, now that we have all that out of the way, let's take a look at why we're here. Let's take a look at the parts. The first thing you'll notice about the parts is the color. The new kit is a much brighter yellow than the original, which is sort of a goldenrod. In regards to the part layout, parts are organized within the kit very differently. which is perfectly fine. What sprue the part is on has zero impact on anything except that it possibly made the kit easier to manufacture, which reduces the cost of production, which is always a good thing. Another noticeable difference is the location of the part numbers. On the original kit, many part numbers were molded onto the part itself. With the new kit, part numbers are molded onto the sprue. This change shouldn't impact those using this kit for studio scale models, as far as I know, part numbers were not visible on the ILM models, at least not on the Sealab parts as used on the Falcon. The original base was sort of a muddy color, hard to describe. The new one is the same yellow as the rest of the kit. As a studio scale modeler, when I purchased the new kit, the biggest question that I had was just how close are the new parts to the old parts? And the answer to that is they're very, very close. These two parts are used on the walkways of the Millennium Falcon and are arguably the most noticeable Sealab parts on the entire build. So I'll use these for comparison. Using a set of calipers, these two images show just how close old and new parts are when it comes to overall dimension. Other parts do show subtle differences. For example, the sensor dish parts, the railings and these panels, are different, with slightly different sizes and texture patterns. But different enough for you to care about on your build? Well, only you know that. The overall dimensional differences of 0.01 millimeters will have absolutely no impact on your studio scale build whatsoever. Doll and Hobby has done a really great job of matching the dimensions of the original parts. And once primed and painted, I think there will be zero people that will be able to tell the difference between old and new. While there were a few delays in getting this kit to market, Doll and Hobby deserves all the kudos in the world for bringing it back to life. From a studio scale modeler perspective, it's really great to have all these parts available again in styrene and at an affordable price. Did Doll and Hobby make this kit specifically for the studio scale modeler? Well, no, absolutely not. But I do know that the community was listened to during its development, and so great for them for listening. They took a big financial risk in this project. They could just as easily have made their own version of the Sealab and ignored the Aurora kit altogether. But by doing it this way, they're appeasing two groups: the people that just want to build a model of the Sealab and the people that want to use the parts for their own projects. So, would I purchase another one? Maybe. The final cost of this, as I said, was about $230, which again is half the cost of the original, but given that I've already made molds and castings of the original parts, I'm not sure I really need a second one of these. Going forward with my build, I'll be using a combination of new kit parts, castings of the original kit parts, and in a rare instance, the real original kit part. Kind of just whatever I feel like at the time and what suits the situation best. You may also notice that I have been reviewing this kit from the eye of a studio scale modeler. But what about those people that just want to build it as the Sealab? How accurate is this to the real Sealab? I don't know. As we've seen, this kit was based very, very closely off of the original Aurora tooling. And Aurora was never one to let details and accuracy get in the way of production. The reality is that until I started to try and source one of these kits for building my Millennium Falcon, I had actually never heard of the Sealab. I didn't know it was a thing. During the research for this video, I did find a few photographs of the real thing, and generally it looks the same, but the small details I can't really comment on. So that's the new Sealab kit, and I hope you found this video interesting and informative. Before I go, I would like to mention that I am trying to improve the production value of the videos for this channel. So far, the camera I'm using is bad, and the lighting I'm using is bad, and the environment I'm in is bad, and it's just generally bad. So if there are things that you would suggest for me to improve the production value and make it easier for you to watch, please let me know in the comments below. So until next time, it's time for me to actually get back to building my Millennium Falcon. So thanks again for watching.